or Teardrop Explodes thing, or the Liverpool Mob, or Howard Devoto in the magazine, and the Cure, and then later on you got bands like Bauhaus, and going into the new romantic thing of the early 80s, I suppose.
In the summer of 1979, The Cure were asked to support Susie and the Banshees on tour. They had only performed a couple of dates when the tour took an unexpected turn.
One of the first big tours The Cure did was supporting the Banshees, which is a perfect tour for them, really. The Banshees always had a really good support balance. It was one of the things out of punk that you didn't wait for your manager to order you what band to take out the road you. A lot of bands at the time were very interested in what was going on, listening to all the grooves. And they picked The Cure to do the tour with them. So the tour starts, it gets going, and the Banshees split up on about the third day to the tour, when the rhythm section, when the guitar player, the drummer, just walks out on the Banshees. But because the band, Susie's got this really kind of persevering attitude, and instead of like scuttling off back to London and giving up, they decide to carry on, and they asked Robert Smith to play guitar with them. He learns the songs overnight. And I think they missed out one date and just carried on the tour.
I think he was more annoyed than possibly we were, because it was his first big tour, and these two people were pulling the rug out from under his feet immediately. So by the end of the evening, he kind of offered his services, and we just sort of laughed it off and forgot all about it. Well, we didn't forget, but we didn't think it was possible. And we went through about a week of really torturous auditions for people. And then we just asked Robert, and he just turned up and played 3 songs immediately, perfectly. And we said, can you do 2 sets a night? And he said, of course, and that was it. We were back on the road within a week.
It seemed odd at the time. It was like some kind of thing Eric Clapton would do, being 2 groups at once, a kind of, super group. But Robert did it out of some kind of perversity, as long as The Cure could keep supporting, giving himself double the work as well, I mean, unbelievable, really. So the tour carried on with Robert, now part of Susie and the Banshees, which he wasn't necessarily the greatest guitar player Susie and the Banshees ever had, because there was something, there was something about him that was other, that didn't quite fit. But I think out of his pop idealism, he wanted to make it work, because, wow, what a great opportunity to suddenly be in this really successful group, and I'm the guitar player.
It was quite strange during the tour, because I felt there was quite a bit of, in some strange way, the fact that Robert was playing with the Banshees as well was kind of divorcing him from the rest of his band. And I think Lowell was cool with it, but I think Michael was a bit maybe envious.
I think it nearly killed him. I think, the idea of doubling up, and the idea of the tension it caused within the Cure, the idea that, he was suddenly in a more successful group, and will he leave? And the idea of the Cure without Robert Smith, well, it was no Cure at all, So I think it was a typical move, really, in one sense, because it was it was a kind of good-natured thing, but also it was incredibly messy, and led to all sorts of psychodrama. And one of the great things about The Cure, of course, is the constant psychodrama, and this was one of those great soap moments, I think, in the life of The Cure.
I think Robert learned quite a lot by being in the band. I think he learned how to be a front person just by standing next to Susie every night for a couple of months. I think he completely changed his persona on stage because of that. He came out of his shell. I think that he learned how to be a bit more flamboyant, and how it was okay. And I think he saw how, how should we put it, Susie's more diva moments were kind of acceptable because they were the front person. And I think he learned how to get away with stuff. And just a bit about stagecraft and learning how to use the audience a bit more. Because, if you look at early clips of their performances, you can see he's he's much more shy and retiring than he becomes a bit later on. And, of course, his whole look changes as well.
Well, his look at the beginning wasn't as extreme as it became, and I think it became extreme because of his period in Susie and the Banshees. And I think because he wasn't really part of the Susie thing, and it was something that had just happened and almost sort of killed him in a way, there was almost a sort of jokey response, and he started to dress like Susie, you know, in a way. He started to be physically like Susie, and I think that's really when that whole thing that became known as the goth thing came about. I think for me it was that period he spent. He wouldn't have worn a crucifix or anything without being in Susie. I think he felt that was the uniform, because he takes those kind of things seriously. He's in a group, this is their uniform, I will wear their uniform. And that whole sexual ambiguity thing, I think, came, you know, to kind of copy the way that Susie looked. And Susie's look was such a big influence on the whole goth, what became known as goth. I think for that period Robert kind of got dragged into that. And it kind of exaggerated his glam pop look and turned it into something kind of somewhere between grotesque and inspiring.
He borrowed Susie's lipstick and disappeared to the toilet and came back with basically his trademark look. I think he was probably a bit worse for the wear in some fashion or other, but it sort of sprang from there, and I think he just, you know, they were, you know, he was already getting into this whole idea of the mask and stuff with pornography, and I think working with us just brought that out a bit more, and it gave him that sort of one sort of barrier between the real him and the audience that I think every sort of front performer needs.
I mean, I don't suppose you can avoid it and people go, oh, him, you know, he looks like Joe Brand or, you know, and the lippy and stuff. But, you know, I've never, ever, I mean, I've always seen past it. And it's just the way he is. And I rather admire him for sticking to it as well. Isn't it true that Mary, she always liked him wearing the lippy and stuff? And so he said, well, you know, if she likes it, I'll keep it. Fair enough.
I started wearing it on stage just because I've got very ill-defined features and I just wanted to make more of them. So it's not so much vanity, I don't think, because it's a bit too odd to be vanity. It's more theatricality.
Robert Smith's image was incredibly important to the Cure's popularity, I think. It was very clever because it was a very androgynous image, so you could copy it if you were a boy or a girl, which is quite unusual, you know, amongst rock stars generally. You know, you might get loads of blokes dressing up as you might get loads of girls dressing up as you, but you very rarely get both. But Robert Smith, if you went to one of his gigs, then, you know, it was actually quite difficult to tell the boys and the girls apart because they'd all have a ridiculous, you know, giant black widow spider perched on their heads. They'd all be dressed in black. A lot of them would be wearing sort of dubious, smudged makeup. And it was brilliant if you were a Cure fan because you could instantly recognise other Cure fans. You know, if you were on your first day at college or, you know, at an indie disco, there was none of this, you know, sort of wondering, oh, I wonder if they like the same music as me, because if they were a Cure fan, you just knew, because they looked like Robert Smith. So you could just walk up and say, no, into the Cure by any chance? And they'd always say yes.
The tensions within the Cure that surfaced during Smith's flirtation with the Banshees came to a head in late 1979. Smith felt that an irreconcilable breach had developed between he and Dempsey was ejected from the band to be replaced by Smith's longtime friend Simon Gallup. Keyboard player Matthew Hartley was asked to join the group, and in early 1980 the new four-piece begun recording their second studio album, 17 Seconds. Standout track A Forest earned high praise from the music press.
Killing an Arab is the one that's been, from the start, has been a really famous song. But Boys Don't Cry is the first kind of hit, and that's the one that kind of crossed them over quite a lot. But for me, the one song that really defines the Cure for me personally is A Forest. It's just got everything that's great about the Cure. It's very sparse. It sounds a bit like the first album. It's got a kind of weird kind of sound to it. It's very poppy, melodic, but it also sounds like that quintessential kind of dark, moody Cure. That kind of, and it's got that kind of weird kind of dream, childlike dream kind of feel to it. It's very, I say modern, but I mean late 70s kind of piece of psychedelia. It's kind of very post-punk psychedelic. It's a very black and white kind of sound to it. And it sounds like it come from any kind of period of their career. It would fit in any album. So to me, A Forest is definitely the quintessential Cure track.
No, I mean, for me, the big one that really changed my whole mind about the Cure was A Forest. And I just thought that was a wonderful combination of spooky guitars and a dream voice, and there a formula seemed to be developing. Yeah, the voice, the guitar, and also an image that seemed very specific to Robert Smith and his mental state. You know, his mental state is always a key factor in a Cure song.